Guys, so we talked a little about the pricing. Now we will move from pricing to a different hot topic and to a person who represents first of the external companies today, more precisely Google. And as many of you is asking me about my camera, so my camera is working, so I'll show you my face. And yeah, now let's talk about policy, because if in difficult times, not only the pricing, not only the brand safety matters a lot, but also no one probably wants to be slapped on the wrist by additional clawbacks or second click or any potential demand decrease limitation for some kind of shady behavior or activities. And I know that a lot of publishers were approached by different kind of companies offering them some kind of quick fixes to protect their revenues during this difficult period. So we asked Google to update you guys on their current policy requirements and the best practices to keep your inventory safe and the advertisers happy. So now I wanted to introduce you to Chris Jones, Senior Publisher Policy Communication Strategist from Google. Chris, happy to have you. The stage is yours.
Hello. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I cannot see you yet.
Oh, just 1 second.
Yes, now I can see you as well. Hi.
Excellent. Hi, guys. Thank you for having me. Simon, I love the library. Looks great. I'm a big fan of The Hobbit. Everyone else, thank you for having me to YieldFest. Pleasure to chat to you guys. I'm going to jump in very quickly, and what we're going to discuss today, once I get my slides up, is essentially Google publisher policies and our publisher restrictions. Quick overview, an overview of what my team does, some basic policy violations, and then some of you submitted questions ahead of time, so we're going to go through those as well. So if you give me 2 seconds, I'm going to pull up my slides. 1 second.
All good, we can see the slides.
Excellent. So, yes, first and foremost, my name is Chris Jones. I'm a publisher policy kind of education specialist, communication specialist for Google, and I sit in our trust and safety team. So I'm going to go through what our trust and safety, who is trust and safety, what we do. As I said, I'll go through our Google publisher policies and restrictions, and then I'll go through some of the Q&A that you sent in. And if we have time, I'll go a bit faster and try and answer some questions that you have actually submitted, or what you can submit now. So first and foremost, what is trust and safety? So Google's trust and safety team exists to create and enforce our policies. We influence product excellence. We identify abuse patterns across the whole ecosystem. And it's really about increasing the safety and the trust in the entire digital advertising ecosystem. So to the team, for us, success looks like a positive user experience that results in happy advertisers, which results in happy users, which results in happy publisher revenue growth. But that's kind of easier said than done, because it looks a bit like this when we take that wheel. It's basically balancing a bit of rocks, because in order to be successful, we need to be good at this balancing publisher revenue and then helping the advertisers distribute their messaging at the same time as protecting the end users. So with enforcement, sometimes advertisers may think that we don't go far enough, while publishers may think that we're going too far with our policies. But when we create these policies, we must keep the needs of the entire ecosystem in mind, the whole industry. So policy development and policies as a whole, that it needs that balance. That being said, we constantly review our policies. So one of my jobs is to come out here and talk to people like you, talk to our publishers, and basically explain our policies, but at the same time, pull in feedback, be it through the YieldFest, be it through basically this Q&A, and get that feedback and give it to our actual policy development team. In TNS, we constantly review these policies. and we make sure that the enforcement is fair and thorough. But at the same time, we need to be mindful of societal changes and newsworthy global events like what we're going through now this in 2020. But with content policies, we strengthen our controls on what content publishers can monetize initially. And sometimes it can seem like we're punishing publishers while benefiting the overall advertisers, but it's important for our industries because without these policies, there's no trust within the whole ecosystem. So in order to do this, we built a massive team so that this team looks on the advertiser side, the user side, and the publisher side. So although we don't disclose the exact number of people in our trust and safety team, I can say we've got well over 1,000 employees dedicating to protecting this digital advertising ecosystem. And we've been doing this for a long time. The TNS team has learned a lot. We built a lot of systems, and it's all based on our learnings. So for example, with our traffic policies, over the many years we've been doing and analyzing a vast amount of data that we have, we've developed and utilized over 180 signals that filter out and protect our network, your sites, the overall ecosystem. But one of the more recent policy changes we did, and I say recent, it was last year, but that feels like 2 weeks ago at this point, is our publisher policies and publisher restrictions. So we made an effort to align our content policies across all of Google, across all of our publisher products. So the same content policies on AdSense, AdMob, and Ad Manager. And we've modified the way we create and enforce these policies to protect this ecosystem. And it's done for a number of reasons. But first of all, it's a simpler framework for you guys. It's easier to understand because it's aligned across all of our products. And then at the same time, we moved some of them from a policy violation to a restriction. So there's no account termination and kind of a risk there in terms of, and there's no policy violation risk there, but we do limit the demand sources. And I'll go through this. So the publisher policies themselves, this is the type of content that we don't want or that are not allowed to show any ads to our publisher products. And these kind of seem easy to understand, but it's essentially copyright infringement via the intellectual property abuse. It's dangerous and derogatory content, which is kind of best way of putting it is hate speech, physical harm, etc. It's our policy around enabling dishonest behavior. So that's kind of content that helps mislead users. There's misrepresentative content, which enables users to engage in content under false pretenses, for example. There is sexually explicit content, which is self-explanatory, and then there's child sexual abuse material and pedophilia, which again, self-explanatory. We looked at how all of these policies were, and these are the ones that we went, okay, no, these are 100% the ones that we're going to keep. These are policy violations. Some of the others we moved to restrictions, and how we made that decision was, as we mentioned before, a list of these the number of policies that we moved to restrictions, we moved the demonetization for that type of content. So we indicate to publishers that limited ad serving is in place with restrictions. Advertisers advertisers determine that demand, or I should say that lack of thereof. And we make it very clear which types of content we will never monetize, again, with policies, and with the goal of simplifying what you guys know you can monetize and what you can't monetize. So we'll take example, alcohol sale and misuse. So before the change, before we introduced Google publisher policies and publisher restrictions, alcohol content was a policy. Since now, it's been moved to a restriction. As a policy, any site that facilitated the online sale of alcohol or promoted alcohol consumption or portrayed alcohol in a favorable light could not be monetized at all. Now, as a restriction, we understand that advertisers may not find this type of content appealing or a good association for their brand. However, we let them decide. So our advertisers have a number of categories that they can obviously choose to opt into, and not all of them will opt into alcohol, but some will. So as an end result, content labeled with the alcohol sale and misuse restriction may receive limited, sometimes no monetization, but it's no longer a policy violation. So you may get some demand, but Google Ads will not purchase on it. And as I said before, these changes are a result of our constant dialogue with publishers like you, with their sales teams, understanding the ecosystem as a whole, understanding the advertiser ecosystem, speaking to them, and trying to find that, again, that balance for everyone of how we can promote a healthy digital advertising ecosystem, at the same time protecting all aspects of the publishers, the advertisers, and the users. So we do make changes to these policies over time. So the best way to understand what these are is Google Publisher Policies, Google Publisher Restrictions. They're separated out, they're in our help centers on both Ad Manager, AdSense, and AdMob. You can go to the help center and it will list out all the, basically it will broken into 2 pages and it will list out all of our policies there. How can you keep up to date? Well, as I said, we make these changes regularly, so we made change logs, policy change logs that you can go in and kind of constantly keep yourself up to date where when we announce a new policy or restriction or a change, it's there. Now, the one thing I will say is the onus is on you to keep abreast of these changes and to be in compliance with them at all times. So, best thing I can sense is, excuse me, best thing I can say is set up a calendar reminder once a month. Put a quick reminder, say 9 a.m., 10 a.m., whatever day, month. Jump in, check the change log. Anything new? No, cool, grand, perfect. But we have made some changes, and I want to give you a quick update on some of these changes we've made in the last 2 months. Just in case you haven't seen them, in case you weren't aware, but you should be aware of these. So the first change was an update to our Google Publisher Policies on supported languages and no content. This one's a bit easy to understand, but as of today, we will not allow new sites to monetize using AdSense, Ad Manager, or AdMob in any of our unsupported languages, or where they do not contain content. So if the site has no content, no page, you cannot, it is a policy that now it is a violation. Another update is we updated our misrep content policy. So as of the beginning of the month, the Google Publisher Policy for misrep content will be updated to prohibit coordinating with other sites or accounts or concealing or misrepresenting your identity or any other material details about yourself where your content relates to political, social issues, or matters of public concern, elections, etc., etc. We began enforcing this on the 1st of September in the US, and as of the 1st of October, it's going to be all in other countries. So something just to keep in mind of when it comes to political, social issues, etc. Another one is our update to our dangerous and derogatory content policy. So as of last month, the Google Publisher Policy for DoD, dangerous derogatory content, was updated to prohibit content that relates to current major health crises and any content that contradicts authoritative scientific consensus. So obviously this is in regard, well, it does directly affect COVID-19 content, so just something to keep in mind. Finally, the enabling dishonest behavior policy. We made an update last month on this, and this is around the update on an update to clarify the restrictions, I should say, on the use of content that promotes spyware or surveillance technology. Essentially, the policy was updated to prohibit the promotion and monetization of the content that enables a user to track or monitor another person without their explicit authorization. So those are very quickly 4 big policy updates that we made in the last 2 months. It's something to keep in mind on. I'm fully sure that most of you, this will have no impact, but a good thing, just as I said, we made these changes, we announced them on the change log, so I would recommend jumping in and once a month, just jumping into the change logs, making sure that there's no updates that will affect you or more that you're aware of them. So let's move on to the specific questions that you submitted ahead of this session, because I wanted to make this interactive. I wanted to answer the questions that you were going to ask and that you wanted the answers to. So first question Is there a policy limitation number of ads on the page? The answer is yes and no. So valuable inventory, which falls under our ad placement policy, means advertisers and other paid promotional materials should not exceed the content. So essentially, the content provided should always add value to the user, and that content should be the focal point for the user visiting the page or the site. So the content you provide should add value, be the focal point of the user, and we may limit or disable ad serving on pages where there's little or no value, or where there's excessive content, or sorry, excessive advertising, until changes are made. So yes, there is a policy restriction there because it's our valuable inventory. It falls under our ad placement policy. But as long as you make the content the focal point of the user or for the user, the advertising should be fine. Next, what penalty can be applied for using not declared ad refresh, or for not using declared ad refresh? So very simple answer here: failure to declare inventory that refreshes or improperly declaring it. So for example, declaring the wrong trigger type or the refresh interval is a violation of our policy, but we will notify you if the violation is detected. So always declare it and make sure you declare it correctly, if that makes sense. How can a publisher check if he or she is flagged and for what kind of violation? This is a nice easy one. Thank you who gave me that softball. The policy center. Each of our products have a policy center, and it's the single most convenient destination for you guys to go to for everything policy related, and the actions that you need to take because of these. So essentially, when you go to our policy center, you can see which of your apps or your pages or your sites we found policy issues on, the information on the exact policy issue and the violation, the steps needed for you to comply. So essentially, we give you information of how to, or what the policy is around kind of say dangerous derogatory and how you need to fix that. But more importantly, we also directly in that interface, you can request a review and appeal once you've addressed those violations. Next, can a publisher use 2 or more AdX or AdSense accounts on his or her website or ad unit? This is an easy one. A publisher can use multiple AdSense accounts on their website, although AdSense policy only allow 1 account per publisher, if that makes sense. Next, how to overturn false positive penalties. So first and foremost, read up on our program policies and understand the minutia of our policies and guidelines and the restrictions. If you still think that your content was wrongly flagged or flagged in error, you need to submit a request, but you need to explain why. So go to the policy center, view the policy violation, and then once you've reviewed it and you're pretty positive that it's been flagged in error, send us the appeal or the review and explain why this is a false positive. Just so you know, we usually request review requests and get back to them in less than 1 week, but 2020 being the way it is, sometimes it can take longer. So just take that into account. Next, can we monetize cryptocurrency related content with Google Tools? If you mean by Google Tools, you mean AdSense, AdMob, and Ad Manager? Yes, that's a simple one. If one site in Google Ad Manager gets banned, does it affect the performance or perception of the other sites? Simple answer, no. When the action is taken on a page or and the page is violating the policy, or sorry, when the action is taken on a page, then it means that page is violating our policy. When the action is taken on the site or the site section, then there are multiple pages within that site or the site section that are violating policy. So it's basically the action is taken on where it is. Now, failure to comply with those policies or egregious policy violations may result in us suspending or terminating your account, which is different. But overall, you're responsible for ensuring that your properties comply with the program policies at all times. So make sure that all of your sites, multiple sites if you have them, are in compliance with our policies. But if it's a site level or site section, then it's only going to affect performance there. Next, how to protect user-generated content from being penalized. So the best way I can say this, I'm assuming this is probably, you're talking about either dynamic UGC or comments, for example. We enforce policies on all content on a page. So therefore, if you include user comments on your page, on your articles, you must have a system to monitor your content in real time, and a way for the user to flag abusive or dangerous from derogatory or hateful content, or use a third-party application. One thing I usually suggest to publishers like yourself is usually have your user comments, your UGC on pages without our ad code. So a great example of this would be placing a CTA, a call to action, below the article for the comments. And if a user wants to leave a comment, they click and they're taken to a separate page for all your comments free of our ad code. So that is not going to be penalized because there is no ad code there. Next, why are ads disabled for sexual content reasons on health-related websites? So quick one there, sexual content doesn't violate our policies. It may not be appealing for advertisers though. So essentially, with sexual content, publishers will not receive a policy violation, but our advertisers and our advertising products probably won't want to bid on it. So you receive restricted demand on that. It's a Google publisher restriction. So the restricted content will receive less advertising than, for example, non-restricted content would. And final question, what are some of the most common policy violations resulting in clawbacks? So we have time. I'm going to jump in and actually show you guys some of the most common policy violations that we see across EMEA and North America. And hopefully then we'll also have some time to go through live questions if we do. First up, we'll start with the restrictions, publisher restrictions, and it's online gambling content. So this is a very common one. And our online gambling content is, our restriction is, or the content I should say, is any content that promotes online real money gambling or any internet-based game where money or other items of value are paid or wagered in exchange for an opportunity to win real money or prizes based on the outcome of that game. So the best example I can give you on this is online casinos, bookmakers, lottery, scratch cards, purchase, etc. So that's a restriction, not a policy violation, but it is a restriction. So that's a very common one we see. Next, tobacco. It's really easy to understand. You'll see here, if your content contains tobacco and is promoting the sale of tobacco or tobacco-related products, it's a publisher restriction. That being said, if it's an education material on tobacco, then your ads can appear there unrestricted. So it's regarding the sale and promotion of tobacco. Next, we spoke about it earlier, sexual content. So if, as a quick kind of guiding rule, sexual content is any content that contains nudity, sexually gratifying, sexually suggestive. It discusses sexual fetishes, entertainment, merchandise, things like that. Although just to remember, sexual content isn't a policy violation. It's a publisher restriction. So it's labeled with an inventory restriction, and fewer advertising sources are going to be eligible to bid on it, and so you'll receive less demand and overall less revenue from it. But again, it doesn't violate our policies. Hopefully that makes sense. That being said, the big difference is basically between sexual content, sexually explicit, and related egregious content, is that sexually explicit and related egregious content is a policy violation. That is everything from sexually explicit, mail or brides, adult theme and family content, and more importantly, child sexual abuse materials and pedophilia material. this is any content, and excuse me for bringing this up, but it's graphic sexual text, imagery, audio, video, games, if it contains non-consensual sexual themes, whether that's simulated or real, or it may be interpreted as promoting some form of an act, sexual act in exchange for compensation. So this is a policy violation, and it's a very egregious policy violation. So remember, sexual content, which is sexually kind of gratifying or suggestive, that's a restriction, not a fault violation, although sexually explicit is. So moving on, dangerous and targeted. The best thing I can say with a guiding rule around DoD is don't have any threatening or harmful content against any individual groups, individuals themselves, organizations, and you need to make sure that includes your UGC, like comments in your comment section. Make sure there is no hateful content, dangerous content, derogatory content there. It's designed, these policies are designed to help ensure that ads don't appear next to content with hate speech, harmful images, or any type of similar content. From a placement policy, one of the biggest and most common, one of the biggest or most common violations we see is where ads are formatted to mimic content, or sorry, vice versa. Never, ever implement Google Ads in a manner that disguises the ad units themselves to look like content or to be part of that. You'll see from this example, the slide kind of shows what how the two ads have been kind of mimicked or formatted to mimic a normal kind of image and things like that, whereas the final one shows that it doesn't. It's a very distinct looking ad and then content. So just be aware of that. And I would say review our policies, our ad placement policy, for more information on that. There's videos for a lot of these types of policies as well. You'll be able to see my face or my team's on YouTube going through each of these. Next, we discussed it at the beginning, or sorry, the Q&A, UGC. So dynamic content is hard for everyone. And the best way I can describe dynamic content is content that continuously changes, like chats, instant messenger, auto-refreshing content, or sorry, auto-refreshing comments, etc. It is imperative that publishers don't place ads on pages where dynamic content is the focus point of the page. Or more importantly, that if you do, it's monitored consistently. So if it's dynamic and it's ever changing, just don't put the ads there. If it's a standard comment section and users can generate the comments themselves on the site without approval, they must be compliant with our policies. So if you as a publisher write an article on a current event, especially in 2020, you're responsible for ensuring that those user comments meet our policy criteria. I hope that makes sense. So I've jumped through. Thank you so much. I'm sure we have a small bit of time. I think we have 1 minute, maybe a few more. I'm going to stop sharing and then we can open up. Simon, if you think, we can jump into some comments.
Sure. So thanks, Chris. You're extremely efficient and you're spot on regarding your timing because you have 1 minute, more or less. We have a lot of questions as usual when the policy topics come up stage. So I think we can take one, just pick and choose in the Q&A section. There is 6 questions. And as I promise, with every keynote, all the other will be answered via email. So there is one follow-up question to the things that you were covering about Google AdSense and AdX accounts on the same ad unit, because you said that the publishers can use different AdSense accounts on the same page, but they only can have one AdSense account, which is of course true. But what about having AdSense and AdX in the same ad unit? Is it policy compliant or not?
I'm going to need to double check. I believe it is policy compliant, but I'm pretty sure it's not suggested. But I will respond to that.
Awesome,
if
awesome.
that's
So any other questions that you would like to cover? What about
okay.
one about native? Sorry, about formatting content to mimic ads. Can we do it in native ads? Whole purpose of native ads is to be formatted as content.
About formatting content to mimic ads. Can we do this in native ads? Yes. But you would need to be using the specific Google format native ads. So not creating native ad units yourselves and kind of changing the ad unit code because that goes against some of our policies because you're changing the actual ad unit itself. So if you're going to do that, yes, native ads, Google AdSense native ads are policy compliant.